And hello, my amazing students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I'm excited to be with you today. We have left the amazing world of ancient India, and we're gonna jump into ancient China. So we'll be covering from China's beginnings all the way up to the Han Dynasty in the course of the next 3 weeks or so. So let's begin. So, first off, you need to know about China is what's called the Huang He. You see this right here, Huang He. I know it looks like Hong He, but the Chinese pronounce it Huang He. So the Huang He, or in English we call it the Yellow River, it flows across China for more than 2,900 miles. Like rivers in early Mesopotamia and Egypt, China's Huang He regularly flooded the land. These floods destroyed homes and drowned many people. As a result, the Chinese called the Huang He, or the river, China's sorrow. So we talked about, the Egyptians, they had a more predictable flood, so it was easier. The Mesopotamians, they had a destructive flood from the Tigris and Euphrates. And the Chinese, it was also very unpredictable when the Huang He would flood. So here's a map, and I told you it's either Huang He or Yellow River. So you can see the Yellow River right here, and you can see it follow along here. So that is the route of the Yellow River. And the next river, which is south of the Huang He, is called the Chang Jiang. Now, China also had another great river. Now, the Chang Jiang, it flows for about 3,400 miles, so almost about 500 miles more than the Yellow River, east across central China, where it empties into the Yellow Sea. Like the Huanghe Valley, the Changjiang Valley also has rich soil for farming. So looking at this map again, so the Yellow River, the Changjiang is also known as the Yangtze. That's how it's pronounced in English. So English Yellow River, English Yangtze, and here is the river that's called the Yangtze or the Changjiang. Okay? So I know it might get a little confusing, so I thought I'd just create this for you. So Huang He equals Yellow River. They are the same. The Changjiang equals Yangtze. They too are the same. Now, the Yellow River gets that name from the rich silt and minerals that are filled within that river, and it turns the river to more of a light brownish slash yellowish tint. Therefore, it got the um, the name of the Yellow River. So farming in China started along the Huanghe and the Changjiang. Changjiang, they grew rice mainly, and on the Huanghe, they grew cereals such as millet or wheat. Early settlements, villages along the Huanghe grew into large towns. Chinese left many artifacts like fish hooks, tools, pottery. After 3000 BC, the potter's wheel was invented in China. They had burial sites. They provided great information about early Chinese culture before any dynasties or empires arose. Chinese, they would fill their tombs with objects. Some tombs had nicer things than other tombs, which tells us that there was what we call stratification, which is there was rich and poor population. Because if some people were being buried with nicer things than others, then that means that that person most likely was wealthy and came from a wealthy family, etc. This shows that a social order developed in person. If the person was rich, the tomb was filled with jade and other precious items. So what's jade? Jade in the raw looks like this. Jade, when polished, looks beautiful like this. Okay, so jade is actually very popular stone in China even today, and it's quite pretty. Okay, so the I'm trying to remember how you say this now. The Shui Dynasty, I believe. Shah, the Shah Dynasty. Okay, I'm back. The Xia Dynasty. We only know about the Xia Dynasty by stories. There's no evidence that it existed. So the Xia Dynasty, we don't have any evidence that it existed, but there's legends that it was. There was a man named Yu the Great, and he was the founder, and he built canals and all over China to stop flooding and to try to stop the devastation of flooding and losing your crops and getting them destroyed. The Shah dynasty is important to Chinese because it told about kings who solved problems by working together. So again, no evidence whatsoever, archaeologically at least, that the Shah dynasty existed. However, there are legends, so most likely there probably was someone called Yu the Great somewhere in history. So the Shang dynasty is next. So after the Xia dynasty, which again we have no evidence, but we do have evidence of the Shang dynasty. So the Shang dynasty had kings. So the people of the Shang dynasty were divided into groups, also known as castes. The most powerful group was the king and his family. The first Shang king ruled over a small area in northern China. His army used chariots, bronze weapons to take over nearby areas. In time, the Shang kings ruled all over most of the Huang He Valley. So civilization in China, complex civilization is going to begin along the Huang He. Chinese warlords. Later, Shang kings chose warlords to govern kingdom territories. Warlords are military leaders who command their own armies. However, the king controlled even larger armies who defended the kingdom's borders. The king's armies helped him stay in power. So the king uh, would give providences or portions of areas of land so that they to warlords, so they would with their smaller armies make sure that order is conducted within there. You don't want any uprisings or insurrections. So Chinese warlords were very common, but they were under or subjected to the king. Chinese aristocrats and farmers. Under the king, the warlords and other royal officials made up the upper class. Want to make that clear. They now we're talking about aristocrats and nobles who they were wealthy because they owned land. Okay? So aristocrats and nobles, they own land. Aristocrats pass their land and their power from one generation to the next. So not only did they own land, but they passed their station, their social status, their land, everything to their family from generation to generation. In Shang China, a few people were traders and artisans. Most Chinese, however, were farmers. They worked the land that belonged to the aristocrats. They grew grains such as millet, wheat, and rice, and raised cattle, sheep, and chickens. A small number of enslaved people captured in war also lived in Shang China. So just to give you an idea, so we can kind of put this to rest here, social order in Shang China is the king, warlords, and the nobles, which are king's family. Okay? Second, artisans. These are people who usually made things, and they also owned land. When you own land, that's a very powerful thing. And then third are the farmers, which would make up the majority of the Chinese, and then a smaller number would be the slaves. So spirits and ancestors. People in Shang China worship gods and spirits. Spirits were believed to live in mountains, rivers, and seas. The people believed that they had to keep the gods and spirits happy to make offerings of food and other goods. People also honored their ancestors and departed family members. Offerings were made in the hope that ancestors would help in times of need and bring luck. So, spirits, they believe in spirits, okay? They believe in the worshiping of these spirits or gods, whatever you want to call them. But they also believed in the honoring and the supplication or looking towards their ancestors who have passed on. If you've ever watched Disney's Mulan, they highlight this quite nicely, where when Mulan gets in trouble and she goes off, pretending to be a male a Chinese warrior in her father's stead, they beseech the ancestors, and the ancestors try to come up with an answer, and then Mushu kind of jumps in and takes care of it when he wasn't supposed to. But very, very comical and entertaining nonetheless. Oracle bones. Shang kings believed that they received power and wisdom from the gods, the spirits, and their ancestors. We already talked about that, right? The kings asked for the gods' help by using what we call oracle bones. We don't do this today, obviously, but very interesting nonetheless. Priests would scratch questions on these bones and then place hot metal rods inside the bones, causing them to crack. So, for example, a king could say, am I going to win this next battle? The priest will scratch this on the bone, then they will insert the white hot poker or rod through the bone, and the bone will start to crack under all the intense heat, and then the priest will somehow look at the patterns of the cracks, and they will interpret what the answer is, and then they would give it to the king. And so kings would ask all sorts of questions. Then the question would be, hey, am I going to survive this plague or this illness that has befallen me or whatever? Okay, any kind of question they had, it would be written on that bone. The priest would then begin the process, and whatever cracks were there, the priest would interpret for the king. So here we have a emperor, a Shang emperor, and then he's holding a piece of bone, which on the other side would have some kind of a writing on it that the priest said, we've interpreted this for you, and this is your fortune. So here's an actual artifact of what the bone would look like after it was broken. So you have the writing, and then you have the cracks as well, which would be what the priests interpret. So advances during the Shang Dynasty. So they had a social order. They have a writing system. The writing system first started off as pictographs, and then slowly morphed into what Chinese became later and even today. So here would be like pictures. Like here's a picture. It looks like two doors, and then here's the actual word for door in Chinese. Here you have the sun. Here and then there you have the moon, which is in a banana, half moon, crescent moon shape, and you have it here. So you can see the progress from pictographs to actual writing. And Chinese are not the first to do this. The first are actually the Sumerians. Sumerians began with pictographs as well, and then they slowly morphed into what they later called cuneiform. Okay? So the use of oracle bones, which we just discussed. We talked about war chariots briefly. They had those as well. Use of bronze, and the development of a calendar based on the cycles of the moon. And that's pretty much it. So that's gonna do for the Shang Dynasty in China. So in this, we talked about the early parts of China. We talked about the Huang He, the Chang Jiang. We talked about early settlements. We talked about the Xia Dynasty, which is only a legend, and we don't have any archaeological evidence that existed. And then we finished off with the Shang Dynasty, talking about the kings, the warlords, the social status, and the oracle bones and all that. So go ahead and write your one-page summary on all that, and I look forward to talking to you about it at the first of the week. Until then, bye-bye.